Hello, once again, everybody. We are here to help. Gordon Dill with consumer expert Diane Lee. Diane, I think this is our 25th episode of Here to Help. Isn't that cool?
Really? Woohoo! Where are the balloons?
Right? And 50 of your stories now we will have profiled, which is pretty impressive. So very quickly, that's a lot of work. I hope people appreciate how much time and work you've put into these stories. It really is hard work. I know it is.
Thank you, Gordon. And it's enjoyable talking with you and sort of reaching a larger audience with this Here to Help online. And hopefully we can educate more folks.
Well, we've got a good one today. Actually, we have a couple of very good ones today. Both of them sort of centering around the idea of protecting our identity. And one of them, I think maybe is a little more old-fashioned. I don't know how many people are still writing paper checks. Yeah. But it is still a real vulnerability for people.
It is. Whether you live in a not-so-good neighborhood or especially if you live in a good neighborhood, you want to consider whether it's smart to put that check in your mailbox.
The U.S. Post Office says mail theft is a growing problem, whether the thieves are trying to steal your identity or your checks. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee with a warning from a Greenville victim and how a few key steps can help you avoid check fraud.
As a businessman, Hal Dillard keeps a close eye on his finances. So when a vendor never got his check, something didn't add up.
I was told by a bank employee that the check had cleared and it cleared in someone's name I'd never heard of. So at that point, I knew that we had a big issue, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, to be honest.
It wasn't hard to put two and two together. Dillard had a good idea where the check had likely been stolen.
I never do this, but I put 2 checks in our personal mailbox at our house. And someone turned checks for $749 that I wrote and $432 that I wrote into $9,749 and $4,800.
While the smaller check was flagged, the nearly $10,000 one was cashed through a mobile banking app, despite a signature that looked nothing like Dillard's.
I didn't understand how this could get through the system.
Arthur State Bank, where the funds were drained, is certainly not alone. The most recent report on mail theft-related check fraud from the U.S. Treasury cites more than 15,000 cases, totaling $688 million in just a 6-month time frame. The chief operating officer at Arthur State says both his bank and the one that received the funds have a screening process, but it's a fine line between catching fraud and delaying the deposits of thousands of legitimate checks.
They do look for different security features to make sure that they're valid, but unfortunately, in situations like that, the scammers are able to leave certain things in place to get it to pass initial inspections.
And it's always about learning from these experiences. Is there anything that the bank has gleaned that might be helpful in the future?
We try to monitor checks over certain dollar amounts. We have employees that regularly watch customer accounts, especially if someone happens to have been a victim more than once.
Gregory says banking apps are a key tool for customers to stay on top of withdrawals so they can flag anything suspicious. As for catching the criminals,
thousands of packages a day.
U.S. Postal Inspector Breslin Steverson says mail theft cases keep him busy.
When you follow the trail, what do you notice happening with these counterfeit checks?
So these counterfeit checks are a lot of times starting off as, actual checks that were stolen. Then they're posted on an app like Telegram where these criminals think they have anonymity. They sell the checks, or they try to sell the checks or the information from the checks to other criminals so they can be reprinted, counterfeited.
Even these blue drop boxes have been broken into. So as part of Project Safe Delivery, the post office is in the process of retrofitting these, removing these drop-down arms and replacing them with slits with rakes inside so thieves can't steal the mail.
After a 3-week investigation, Arthur State returned the funds to Dillard's account.
If our customer was done wrong, we're going to make our customer whole.
A relief for Dillard, who has learned a vital lesson.
I will never put any payment or check or anything important in our personal mailbox again. I would take that directly to the post office.
That really is the safest way to send a physical check.
Yeah, although I wonder, Diane, 15,000 of these cases a year, that seems like a pretty high percentage, because most people don't use checks anymore. It's kind of an old-fashioned way to make payments.
And that figure actually, Gordon, was over a 6-month period. And that is that blew my mind to learn that it really is that big of a problem. And so it just speaks to the importance of making sure that if you are going to continue to use paper checks, then you really have to be extremely careful and take those extra precautions. Like we said, go to the actual post office instead.
I do wonder about this on the banking end of it. So these checks are stolen. Somebody fills in a new amount. They deposit. They have to be depositing it into an account somewhere. So it seems like it would be a hard crime to get away with. Why aren't they catching more? The money's gone into an account. Someone has had to open that account. Someone has to go make withdrawals from that account. They must be opening and closing these accounts all the time to get away with it. How are they getting away with it?
Here's what's happening. I think the mobile app system is making this a little bit easier for these scammers, because you can forge that check and then take the image of the check to deposit it in a mobile format, right? And that means that it's still under scrutiny by both banks, by the way, by the one that's issuing the check and then the one that's receiving it. But because you don't have that in-person relationship as much with the deposit situation.
Your face is not on camera at the bank and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's become a little bit easier for these scammers to do this. Also, the inspector had mentioned with the United States Postal Service that there are these crime rings. So when you mention how difficult it is, this is a sort of a difficult scam to pull off. But these crime rings, it's kind of their job, which is extremely unfortunate. But they work at this and they make a lot of money doing it, unfortunately.
So you allude to that in your story, the idea that somebody will steal the check and probably steal the routing number and the account number and that, and then are they just printing their own checks and writing them off of that stolen information?
Yeah, there's various ways they can do it. So they can do exactly what you said, print their own checks using your routing number and information. They can also kind of whitewash the original check, which wouldn't lead to as much of a loss necessarily unless they made that amount really, really big, which in some cases
$10,000 in your story. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Changing it from a couple hundred to that much. Yeah, exactly. But it's the sharing of that information that can get really dangerous. And again, on the dark web, that's what they're saying, or using some of these apps out there where you can communicate and the communication is, in a way that investigators can't read it. It just leads to the sharing of information and releasing of your private information. So you have to make sure that if this happens to you, that you have to close that bank account. But I will say what is difficult in these situations is that so many of the people that this happens to, and I actually got 3 emails from people that this very same thing happened to after this story aired. And for every email we get, we always assume there's a lot more out there. Sure. And the difficulty is that they just didn't want to close the account because they had so much coming through that of some of these people were small business owners.
Yes. My direct deposit, your salary, it goes direct deposit into this bank account where they have the routing number here at work. Yeah. I auto pay most of my bills out of that. I auto pay my mortgage out of that bank account. So to have to close and reopen a bank account for something like this is a massive hassle. And you're going to miss some of that stuff. You're going to have late payments on your electric bill or whatever because that was an auto pay.
Right, and that's just for an individual. This was a businessman. So for 25 years, people had been using that same account number. He actually opted to do something which has an expense to it, which basically kept the same account number, but had a very heightened fraud alert on it. And he has to pay like an extra $125 a month for it.
Wow.
Yeah, but for him, as much of a pain as that is to revamp his entire accounts and, with all the business that he does, that would be perhaps more difficult.
Honestly, if it's saving him from having to open a bank account, $125 or whatnot, might be a drop in the bucket. But talk about that extra protection. What is that? What are they doing? What are you paying for?
Yeah, so basically you're paying for every single check that is taken out of your account to be reviewed by a human being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that means that they would make sure that if something's going to be deposited, it was what you originally wrote. So they would have to check back with you on that to say, did you make check number blank in this amount? And you would have to verify, and then they would allow it to be cashed.
Well, the check's on the screen here, so this is good. Yeah. That is very obviously not his signature. So had a human reviewed that, certainly that would have been flagged. It's clear that did not happen with these stolen checks.
Right. And that's where we ask the bank, what are the processes here? Again, it's supposed to be reviewed by the bank, the outgoing bank, and the one that's receiving it. And so, you can't necessarily point fingers. I mean, this is a day and age when it's so hard to keep on top of scammers, but really it is behooving on these banks to review on each side. And this is a bank that has a very strong relationship with their customers, which is why they had a really good policy of giving back this money. Clearly, they identified it as fraud. But I have to say, Gordon, that a lot of people mistake scams with fraud, okay, right? You would look at this and say, well, this is a scam, but this actually is classified as fraud. And here's why. Because this gentleman did not do anything. He did not get tricked into moving any money.
This is theft.
It was theft. It was pure up done by somebody else. But so many times we at 7 News get calls about people who were tricked into wiring money in some way, shape, or form. And in those situations, you often don't get your money back. There is one caveat I should mention, and this isn't true every time. But if somebody is impersonating an employee at your bank, in that situation, you are victimized and you are a scam victim and tricked into sending some money, but they've impersonated someone at your bank and made some reason why. Usually it's one of those texts like, your account is at risk and someone's taking the money. Did you send this? And then you say no, and they're like, okay, well, we need to have you do this all, and then you end up losing money. So in that situation, you do have a much stronger case where even though it is a scam, you can argue to get your money back, and that often does happen.
To that point, this is Arthur State Bank that the victim in your story is using. It looks like the app that either you or your photographer is using is Truist Bank. I wonder, you mentioned if it is fraud, if your money is stolen from you in this way, the bank would pay that back. Is that universal, or is that something I should check with my bank about if I have an account there?
So normally, if it is fraud, you have protections under federal consumer law that it would be universal that you should get that back if fraud is determined. But here's the problem. Sometimes those investigations take 90 days and you might need the money right away. Yeah. Sometimes there's still issues where they say, we're not so sure, because there's sometimes a fine line between scams and fraud, and they're not the same thing. So I would say nothing is a definite, but you do have some pretty strong consumer protections, at least when it comes to fraud and banking.
So again, if you're tricked, if you in any way participated in this, even unwittingly, you might not get your money back in a case like this that we're talking about, where it is straight up they stole his money. He had no idea. And I guess he only found out about it because the guy he wrote the check to called and said, where's my money?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there, too. You mentioned the apps. Like we showed Truist, but it really is any bank, right? Arthur State has their own app.
Sure.
It's so important nowadays to have the app of your bank and sign up. Not only just have the app, but make sure that you get those notifications immediately if there are any changes to your account, because time is of the essence in this situation. And actually, I believe, according to the federal law, you only have 60 days to file a fraud claim. Okay. So because of that, you really want as immediate notification as possible. If you see some transaction that is not likely one that you made, you need to contact them right away. And the best way to do that is not wait for your bank statement, if you even look at your bank statement every month.
Right.
It's to get that immediate notification through the apps.
Especially if you're running a business, you should be checking those transactions, those withdrawals daily.
Yeah.
Daily. All right, Diane, there's a lot to talk about here. This is a great story. You're right, it is about checks, but it is also a lesson to just sort of pay attention to what's going in and out of our bank account every single day, regardless of whether you're writing physical checks or not.
Yes.
It's a great way to protect yourself. We've got another great way to do that when we come back after taking a very short break. And we are back. Gordon Dill with consumer expert Diane Lee, and we were just talking about the next story we're about to tell you here. And this one, boy, I think I'm going to want to talk about it for an hour and a half. Maybe we'll talk about it more than once. Diane, this is about maybe the thing that contains almost all of our lives now, our cell phone, and keeping that secure.
I know. If you really think about it, how much private information do you have on your cell phone?
Yeah.
How many apps that show how much money you have and things like that? You really have to lock it down, be safe. And this story speaks to why.
Confession, I had to deal with identity theft recently. Someone tried to take out a credit card in my name. And the reality is there are more and more attempts to steal all of our information than ever before. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee with a warning about why it's so crucial to take key steps to guard your identity and to act fast if something looks wrong.
This is our file
The paperwork,
that we have kept on all our identity theft information.
the sheer anxiety.
I was in a panic.
Terry and Bob Phillips in Greenville were stunned when hackers ported Bob's phone number and accessed his iCloud.
Once they got that, then they're you.
When Bob's phone stopped working, Terry got an alert from their bank.
I was afraid that they would drain the account.
In addition to getting a debit card through Truist, they were able to get a new American Express credit card.
In fact, it was overnighted to them.
Yeah, overnighted, and of course, I paid the overnight fee.
So egregious you have to laugh, but it didn't stop there. The Phillips got an AT&T bill for the new phone service on their ported number. Plus, Bob was locked out of his Social Security account after all the failed login attempts. And then a week later, Terry's phone number was also stolen.
And it only took them 35 minutes to get into the bank account again and change the password.
Phillips showed us their Spectrum mobile statement with the 4-digit safety code right on the front, just like the online homepage. She said she had to convince Spectrum she didn't port the number.
He said, well, yes, you did. You gave us the PIN number. And no. So that makes me feel definitely the fact that the PIN number was so accessible that opened us up to this whole scam.
Spectrum told 7 News the company has recently added multi-factor authentication as an additional layer of security when transferring mobile numbers.
It's the Sam's Club.
However the hack happened, the Phillips are one of almost 1.5 million Americans who become identity theft victims each year, according to the Federal Trade Commission. Detective Brian Byers with the Pickens County Sheriff's Office warns children are a growing target.
Well, identity theft is something that's not if, it's when. We are all going to be a victim, and our children are the easiest targets because we won't find out about it till years later.
Byers says he's had numerous cases, like a recent one where the victim was a baby at the time of the ID theft.
When she applied for college, she found out that a person had been living as her, they were illegal in the country, had been using her identity for 18 years, even paying taxes.
To protect yourself, freeze your credit at all 3 major credit reporting agencies. It's fast and free. Also, make sure your passwords for different accounts are unique and strong. Plus, use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. And if you're hacked,
The first thing you need to do is to get to the bank.
It's also important to file a police report, even if you don't think much can be done. Companies will ask for that to prove that you're a victim of identity theft, and it's the only way to get 7 years of fraud alerts on your accounts.
the Phillips say they were fortunate to get any lost funds returned. They now watch their accounts daily, knowing the hackers could strike again.
It's easy to steal someone's identity, but it's really hard to get it back.
It really is a headache. Now, we reached out to Truist and American Express, and like all financial institutions nowadays, they say they're seeing a sharp increase in fraud attempts. But like the Phillips, your accounts are protected as long as there's proof someone else moved the money.
That starts with your story about somebody trying to open a credit card in your name. As you know, the exact same credit card company at the exact same time someone tried to do me too. What was terrifying about that, Diane, is I remember clearly they had my Social Security number.
Yeah.
They had my correct home address. They had everything they needed to rob my identity. They didn't get anything out of it, but it's scary stuff.
Yeah, the reason why Gordon and I know about this is a not so funny story is that Gordon heard me on the phone at work addressing this hack of my credit card. And then what was it? Was in like 3 days?
Oh, yeah.
Same thing for you?
24 hours probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, same
not fun.
thing, same bank. It's infuriating, and to the point made in your story, it happens like that you find out somebody's done it, and as soon as you hear about it, my first thought was not that I was going to lose a lot of money. My first thought was I was going to lose a week of my life fighting to shut all this stuff down, whether it was contacting the credit reporting agencies, contacting banks, credit cards. It's a nightmare to deal with all that stuff once you've been victimized.
It is a nightmare. And then if you have recurring payments out of a card, I mean, it's so frustrating to have to like redo those with a different card. But in this situation, I should lead by saying, Spectrum, this is why I appreciate so much people alerting 7 News to these issues, because we can go right to the very reputable companies and say, listen, this is happening. Do you want to take a look at your security system more? And Spectrum did make some changes here right away that so it is a much safer situation in terms of not just that 4-digit PIN that actually appeared on the statements. It physically appeared on the statements.
Oh, wow.
They took that off the statements. They did the two-step authentication.
It's like an
and things
obviously
like that.
bad idea to write your PIN on the statement.
Yeah, it wasn't so good. And we don't know how the hackers got the PIN in this situation, but clearly they had the PIN, they had the phone number, they had all the information, and they were able to port the number over to a completely new company, AT&T, and sort of mimic that phone and just use it to get into the bank accounts and things.
Well, let's talk about that because, whether it's my email here at work or bank accounts or whatnot, lots of things I feel much more secure because it has that two-factor authentication. I log in with a password, and then they want to text a number to my phone that allows me to actually get into the account, which feels very, very secure. But once someone has, and you call it porting a number, tell people what that means.
So basically what it means is you're taking someone's number and you are bringing it over to a totally new service. So same phone number, but new service. And so you can kind of set up that phone just like that. And if you have other things, if you are like the iCloud information that the scammers clearly also had, then you can even do a lot more damage really acting like that person.
Like email addresses and that kind of deal as well. Again, getting into that two-factor authentication. I wonder if one way around it, someone very recently tried to steal my 401k. Same kind of thing. Same kind of thing.
How did you figure this out?
Well, I figured it out because I was getting all these text messages that were sort of this phony way to trick me into giving them that two-factor authentication number. And when I logged onto the account, it said, change your password. There have been too many fake login attempts.
Oh, wow.
So, whoever did it, so I did. I changed everything. And the other step I took was now it's not just two-factor authentication in the sense that it asks me for that PIN number. It's two-factor authentication in that it has the facial recognition ID as the second factor.
It's
of
interesting
login.
you brought that up because I've spoken to a number of IT professionals who say, don't just rely on the two-factor authentication anymore. The biometrics are where it is. They're a lot more difficult, obviously, to break. You would have to have the individual right there or something in order to do that. So that's really good that you set that up. And interesting that you say that because it wasn't my 401k, but about a month ago, I got all these attempt logins for my MyChart account.
Oh, yeah.
And as you know, I've told you before, the MyChart information, your health information, for some reason, is the most lucrative to these hackers on the dark web.
Well, it's the
insurance fraud.
Insurance fraud is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And my doctor's office got hacked, so all my stuff is out there
Right.
already. Diane, I feel like I've been hacked like 900,000 times. So to that point, we've all been hacked. You have a police officer in your story or an IT expert in your story say, if it hasn't happened to you, it's going to. And I think everybody watching this has probably experienced this at some point. And there is a tendency, and I think young people are very susceptible to this because they say it all the time. I've been hacked 1,000 times. Why should I care? Right. My information's all out there. What difference does it make? There is no security left. Is it worth it to even try and fight to protect all this data about ourselves, or should we just assume it's all out there?
No, 150%. It is worth it. You've got to fight the fight because for instance, in the situation that the investigator said where a child's identity was taken and they didn't figure it out till they reached age 18 and tried to apply for college and realized that somebody had been, paying taxes and all that. You need to know. Knowledge is power. You don't want someone to be acting as you. So there's various levels of these kind of hacks, but what you're really trying to avoid is the worst situation, the all-out identity theft. And so, every year we should be looking at our credit reports to see if there's anything funky on there, which are really big clues. We should be keeping, as we mentioned in our previous story, the apps of our banking institutions and making sure that we've set up the notifications so that we see anything funky going on there.
And your credit cards and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. And here's the big thing. We need to make sure that our passwords are unique for the different accounts that we have. I can see that it would be back in the day. It was it was so much easier to remember. So many of us would take maybe our Spectrum account and have the same password for our bank account.
And when you change it, your password would be cheeseburger, and then it would be cheeseburger 1, cheeseburger 2.
Yes, maybe a pound sign in there somewhere.
Right,
but
that's it.
No,
simple.
and we just cannot do that anymore. So you've got to have those unique passwords, especially the really difficult passwords. Make a whole sentence for your banking app and things like that.
These people who are victimized by the identity theft in some of these cases, are they getting their money back, or is a lot of it just gone?
No, usually it's gone. I mean, in this situation, they did actually get their money reimbursed because, again, it was so clearly fraud. They hadn't been tricked into anything. It was someone else had completely ported it over. It was just the frustration and the headache of trying to prove who you are and that is not you. Because as you heard, Terry Phillips was saying there that when she called them, they said, "Oh, no, you gave them the PIN number." No, I did not give them the PIN number. So yeah, but,
You got the PIN number, but you didn't get it from me.
Right, exactly.
Well, so, Diane, is there a cure-all step to protect yourself from this type of identity theft, or is it just eternal vigilance to wait for it to happen to you?
I think you've got to make sure that the tools on your phone, which are with you all the time, are the ones that are going to help you the most. So thinking about just setting up those notifications for any changes to your financial accounts, as we mentioned, is really, really key. I have talked about this before, but I think that everybody who's not going to be taking out a car loan or a mortgage loan at any point should freeze their credit. And in a situation like what the Phillips had, you really should consider getting that statement from the police so that you can get a seven years of fraud protection on your accounts. And that's mainly your 3 credit reporting accounts, so that there's just heightened alert there that you are a victim of identity theft, because this went to a very egregious nature.
Yeah.
And that just means that you could be at risk for further things. We all know that scammers are sharing all of this private information on
And
the dark
selling.
web.
Yeah,
Exactly,
and
and
selling
selling
it.
it.
Yeah.
Which could make you a victim over and over.
Is your credit frozen right now?
Oh, yeah. My credit's frozen right now.
So is mine.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess we've discussed some of the reasons why, but I always feel like if people take literally nothing away from watching Here to Help, go freeze your credit. It is the the way to protect yourself from all of this kind of theft and fraud is just do it today.
Yes.
Call 3 agencies and freeze it.
The worst damage they can do is taking out some mega loans in your name. I mean, even if your bank account were hacked, you're usually, if it's a proven fraud, you're going to get that money back. But if someone's taking out a mega loan in your name, think of the headache of that.
I really don't want to think about the headache from that.
Gordon, I hope you are not, I hope 2026 is a year of no identity theft issues for you.
I don't know why. There are fraudsters all over the world that think I have a lot more money than I do, that's for sure. That is consumer expert Diane Lee. I'm Gordon Dill. We'll see you when you join us again next time for another episode, the 26th episode of Here to Help.